Our next speaker will be Dr. David Grossman. He's the director, our own George Mason University's senior director of technology transfer and industrial engagement. And himself is an engineer, attorney, yes, and an entrepreneur. So himself hold like 20 patents or even more than that. And he have a lot more people here in George Mason get more patents. So today we're gonna hear his experience.
Okay, well, thank you. So sometimes I like to give myself an introduction of what it is I do. I'm the senior director of tech transfer and industry collaboration. But just like it was just stated, I've had a bunch of careers. I started out in art, and so went into engineering, worked on radars, worked on rockets. I was a toy designer, toys. I've had several businesses, and somewhere along the line, I accidentally walked in the front door here at Mason. So anyway, I was asked to talk about tech transfer and entrepreneurship support, but I'm open to questions at any time about anything. And if I don't know the answer, I'll say I don't know. But actually, if you ask the right questions, you'll end up with a story that'll go well into the next person's time. So tech transfer. I've got stuff going into the thing. It happened earlier today. Anyway, it's really just transitioning technologies, through collaborations with industry, with other, with governments, with other nonprofits. I'll sort of explain how all that works. But our real thing that we're really interested in is impact. In other words, we really want to take ideas that people have and try to just get them out somewhere into the public. A lot of people think about tech transfer as money, but really money is usually sometimes a byproduct. Really, we just want to make sure that things are being used. And when you're at a university, you get to be around all kinds of new technologies that are really early stage that have the potential to make a great impact. And sometimes you don't even see it for 10 or 15 years after it started, after the development started. So I'll be going into some of the different aspects of what we have. And I'm sorry about this because it doesn't quite line up the way I wanted it to. But, a lot of inventions that we don't even think twice about all started at universities. Gatorade is like the greatest example. It was actually, I met the inventor of Gatorade a couple times, but they originally wanted to patent it, and then they got into a fight with the government, and they ended up dropping the patents. But look what happened. It's an invention that started with a simple question, because that's sometimes how inventions come. The inventor was a doctor, and one of the janitors used to be a football player for the Philadelphia Eagles, and he came in one day and basically said, "Doc, why do we pee so much during halftime?" And that whole conversation within one day was the Gatorade was on the field being used by the football team. And within a week, the football team kept coming up to his lab saying, can you make us more? Can you make us more? So the other ones you've seen, of course, the vaccine, a lot of them are in the bio area, but then we have a lot in the engineering area. And I think quantum now, as we've sort of seen in that long list that you guys had, is just, going to be all over the place. It's going to be a major revolution. So anyway, I put this picture on here because if everyone knows this picture of the university, if you've seen it from where the pond is in the front, if you ever need to find us, we are right here. Top floor, corner office. I like to say that we have the best office on campus because you look out one window and you get to look out over the plaza at the Performing Arts Center, and you look out the other window and get to watch all the geese and dogs running around the pond. Actually, the geese are normally in the pond; the dogs are outside, not chasing. So we're kind of an interesting area because we deal with a lot of different areas, right? We deal with all the researchers, yet we deal with business. And we deal with the law. We probably deal with other areas too. Every once in a while, controversies come in, and next thing you know, we're also therapists. And we also deal with different groups of people, the government, entrepreneurs, the university. But the one area that we're kind of spend the most amount of time, I think, is dealing with protecting intellectual property one way or another, or like, marketing and licensing the technologies to try to find a good. And I'll talk a little bit about some of these upcoming slides. So this is what we do, and I'll talk about each of these except marketing a little bit on a couple forward slides, but basically we start with ideas and researchers and what they're coming up with, and we go all the way through evaluating the best way to protect them, market them, and then we start going into licensing, and eventually the product comes out the other end where it's actually being used by the public in some way. And then hopefully some of that feeds back into the research and development. So, and it all starts with our research. So, and it's not just researchers. I'm saying researchers here because I often talk to faculty, but it's students. We probably get, I don't know the percentage, but we have a lot of students walk in our doors also. But it starts with the technology, it starts with the idea, it starts with the innovation. And then from there, we will normally kick off when we receive some kind of an invention disclosure, or as I like to say, innovation disclosure, because not everything is an invention. Some things are inventions, some things are copyrights, some things are something else. Is my daughter uses. So we will. So now that first slide was sort of this area. Originally, I tried to make it a little darker. It didn't work out well. The development in the that's when the technology is being developed, and then they'll come into our office. So we'll try to figure out what's the value, where's the value proposition, and we will break up technologies into a bunch of different categories. Some technologies are the kinds of things you look at them and you say, these should be used today. Other ones we'll look at and we'll say, boy, this is a technology. We don't think that there's going to be real value for 10 years, and maybe in 15 years, it's going to be the next thing. So we will look at it from all those different aspects. We'll try to decide if it's here today, we'll treat it one way. If it's something that's going to be in the future, then we will probably make the investment and actually file a patent, knowing very well that it may not actually be that valuable for a good period of time. So in that way, the university actually makes investments in the future. If it's something that is very practical today, then we will we'll immediately jump out and try to start marketing the idea. But being a big fan of Venn diagrams since I was 3 years old, probably a little older than that. I always like to try to show what we're really looking for. These when something falls into the middle of this Venn diagram, we think we have a superstar. So do we have good science? Is it a good idea? Is it possibly going to have commercially valuable innovation? And again, like I said, not necessarily today, but will at some point. And can we protect it with some kind of intellectual property? And if we have all those, then we will we'll start sort of cranking our wheels, and we will be good. Also, I do see I've mentioned economic development in here. So I say we want to do societal impact. We have kind of a preference for startup companies. We will license things out to large companies if they approach us and they want it. But we really like to see the technologies going into a brand new company. And it basically will start in Virginia, hopefully, and will over time grow. In that way, we basically create a lot more jobs and bringing new industries to the area. So, just talking a little bit more. So when we're evaluating it, right? So the big one is, I'd say, well, a good large percentage of our inventions that come in are inventions, and we're going to look at them to see if they're better. And I can answer If you end up with questions about patents, about a little bit later, that's probably my strongest suite. I'm a patent attorney in my latest iteration of careers. I've been teaching patent law for about 20 some years at the law school. So we will look to see if it's patentable. And patentability doesn't mean that it's just novel. It means that other people haven't suggested it. It hasn't been done anywhere in the world before. What's the strength of the intellectual property that we'll be able to find? Sometimes it's possible to protect intellectual property, but it's so narrow, it just may not be worth protecting. It may just be worth going out and doing. So we'll look at that. So I don't know, for an example, maybe you didn't invent the wheel, but what you really invented was maybe a pattern for the tread. Maybe that's not worth actually going out and getting a patent on, but it may actually have some value. It may actually be something to be marketed. In that example, we probably would protect it anyway with a patent. We also will kind of look. We'll try to figure out the market. What's the size of it? Is the market ready for a product yet? Are there a lot of people in the area, in the field? Some people kind of feel that it's best to be first to market. Some people feel that it's like best to be third to market. I'm a third to market guy. I think you let the first two people who are coming into a marketplace basically educate everybody else about it, especially if it's a really new area, assuming you got the intellectual property to back it up. What's the state of development? Is it just something that's in a lab? Is it just an idea? Is it something it's only been an experiment in a lab? Or is it something that has actually gotten to the point where it's really a product? Or how long will it take that? And the last one's our budget. We actually do have a budget. So coming into the intellectual property. So I don't know if people know about intellectual property, but there are several different areas, and this sort of shows the four main areas. So we have patents, copyrights, trademarks, and trade secrets. That's the majority of what we look at when we look at intellectual property. There's some others you'll see in another slide. So we're still talking about IP here. So patents are the new and non-obvious inventions. And so it might just be new. Most people understand that, but the obviousness part is kind of an issue. It can't be something that everybody just would have known to do. So the copyrights are the creative works, right? There's the authorship. The easiest way to think of it is if you write a paper, it's actually the collection of words that are in the paper. Software is really a good thing for copyrights because you can actually copyright the actual software itself. There's all kinds of techniques of putting watermarks in there in case anyone ever steals it, so you figure it out. Sometimes software can be patentable also, but a lot of times we just like to go with copyright. Trademarks, we don't actually apply for a lot of trademarks at the university because trademarks are a name that a company uses to identify themselves in the marketplace. So you actually have to have something in commerce. We tend to be pre-commerce, other than Mason's logo and things like that. So the trademarks normally will be obtained by our licensees or our startups. And then the trade secrets are, the information that's generally known, but it's not generally known, right? So one of our faculty members, one who worked with you, Chris, for years, used to always say that he spent 40 years getting to the point where he could solve someone's problems in 30 minutes. And a lot of what he knows is in his head. It's not anywhere else. You can even write a patent, but somehow some of the areas of how do you implement it is in someone's head. It's not something that can be completely documented. So the trade secrets tend to we tend to think that we don't see a lot of them in universities. Because in universities, we try to make everything we do public in general, but it turns out that trade secrets are those aspects that sometimes don't end up in publications. And if someone wants to license a patent, that's where they might need some help in the initial invention. But then we move on to licensing and skip markets. So you sort of see up here, the traditional IP that we have, and then we have biologic materials and know-how. Know-how is a lot, is often related to trade secrets. The thing about know-how is sometimes it hasn't been created yet. It's just you're working with someone who knows how to do something, or they can figure out how to do something as they need it. But when you are trying to license something, it's hard to know what it is you're licensing. I mean, people like to know very specifically what is it that they're getting, what's in the license. And so we like to know what we call the metes and bounds of the agreement. And so intellectual property is an easy way to define that, because if you're not sure what's in a patent, you can go to court, and the court will tell you what's in the patent. At the end of the patent application is a series of sentences that basically very specifically tell you exactly what it is that their person's getting and what they're licensing. Same thing with a copyright. You can actually look at the copyright. If it's in written form, you can do what we call look at the four corners of that piece of paper. You can just look at it, you can read it, that's what you're licensing. So anyway, so that's the beginning of the licensing. And if you have an idea or you have a technology here that you'd like to license and make a company out of, you would start to go through the licensing process. So our licensing process is first, generally someone would identify some kind of technology. They'd see something that they like to begin pursuing. Or they made it up themselves. But first you know what the technology is. Then of course you're gonna have to figure out what the opportunity is. People don't generally start a business just because they think that a technology is really cool. Well, some people do, that'd be nice. But generally they're looking for some opportunity of something that they can sell. And then you have to know how you're going to go about it. How you're going to, not everything is great. You're going to come up with some kind of plan, some kind of an idea. So if you're licensing from the university, we're going to want to see all these first three steps. We're going to need to know what the technology is. We're going to need to know, what's the real opportunity with that technology. What's a basic idea of a commercialization plan? Sometimes people think about business plans. We actually don't go that far. Someone can just come in and give us a small deck that just sort of explains, shows that they've actually at least given some thought, and they've got sort of a path and an idea forward that they think can take a technology to the public somehow. And then we'll go into negotiating terms, and that's a little process of its own. We try to make it really simple. We usually take a sheet of paper with 2 columns in it, and we say what the term is, or what we're trying to negotiate, like what's the IP, and then on the right side we list what the IP is. What's the term of the time that the license is going to exist, and then we'll just fill out these very, very basic ideas of what the license is going to look like. And then those numbers, once we've agreed on them, they end up going into a larger document. But the larger document's much easier to read because most of it is has already been pre-written in most license agreements. No matter what you think attorneys sit down and they just sit there and write these like 30, 40-page documents every time they don't. They basically start with the same document, and then they go in and they customize it to fill in the blanks of the specifics. And then we would execute. We'd execute the license. So the next step now, assuming that the technology is now with a company, is are they going to succeed? We sort of think that there's some major areas that need to be covered to find some success. So we've already talked about, the IP and the technology, but has the technology gotten to the point where you have a prototype? Can you actually show someone that it works? Because if you want to raise funding to help pay for your business, and a lot of people like to use what we call other people's money. You have to convince somebody that they're going to fund you. Well, the best way to convince them in particularly when you're in a field where people don't understand your technology. You really need to just show them that it works. You just need to basically have an example and you can just show them and then they can look at it and they go, oh, I get it. I may not understand what it does, how it does it, but I understand what it does. And then the other two are researchers and inventors in general. And I say in general because it's not always true. Don't really have experience in business. Really, they haven't really learned this area. So it actually, and knowing how to build, come up with the technology is not the same as actually bringing it to market successfully. So we like to see that people have found mentors. If they actually work full time as a researcher, we'd like them to find an outside CEO. So basically, you can think of the researcher is the champion inside the university for the technology. We like to match them with someone outside the technology who basically supports their skill set. They're technical, someone else who knows how to do maybe the business side of it. They can maybe take over the business. Now, that's not always the case. You know, sometimes the inventors become the CEOs, but becoming a CEO is a large commitment.
How do you find those CEOs?
It's really hard. It's really hard. Often people know people in the field. Graduate students often become the CEOs. And I'll get to you in a second. Just the one thing about the experienced CEOs, they get into the business, and CEOs come in different chunks. There's some that are really good at the beginning of a business, some that are good with large businesses. We're looking for the ones that are good at the beginning part, right? The hustlers, the ones who are willing to get their hands dirty and do everything. You know, they'll start a business and they'll exit somewhere between 5 to 10 years after they start their business. And then they want to take a vacation and they do nothing for 6 months other than maybe travel. And then all of a sudden they're looking for another gig because they're bored. Finding that window of those CEOs, right, when they're, you know, right after they've exited is hard. Networking is mostly how we found in the past.
So what is it that you need to find an outside person to be the CEO? Because the way I see it, I truly do believe that the CEO should understand that market segment better than anybody else.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then why not have the researcher be the CEO and then have a CEO and then have somebody else come in and system.
So and some people do that, right? Some researchers will become the CEO and they'll hire someone else to become like a chief financial officer or, you know, take on some of the other responsibilities. The big reason at a university is a lot of the researchers have a day job. And it just takes a lot of time. And it takes a lot of time to be running a whole business, especially if the business takes off. We've had some faculty here, especially in cybersecurity. I'm thinking one off the top of my head, you know, literally built the company or all the science part of the company, right? The part that worked here at the university. And then it just became too much and he had to leave. I mean, he just left because all of a sudden, you know, he's now spending 80 hours a week on his business and can't be teaching. And, you know, when you're spending 80 hours a week, if you can somehow manage to do your CEO tasks in a day a week, you know, it can work out. But it's mostly commitment time. And making sure that you partners with other people, right, that know what you're doing. So was there another question back there?
Maybe a follow-up?
Yes. Yes.
So in those situations where it's a researcher or professor here, like, I guess what is the exit opportunity? What is the just brass tacks money come out of this? Like, where does that go to them? Does that go to the university? Like, how does that?
Oh, okay. So
Like, you know, somebody that takes off.
that's a so the real answer is it depends. I gave that answer yesterday to a question. Everything's all about the details. But a typical deal goes a real startup would be the university might have a little bit of a share, but bottom line is any money that's made at the university, 50% goes back to the faculty or to the faculty members collectively. So it ends up being shared 50-50. But other things end up in the deal, right? I mean,
Details.
yeah, I mean, and there could be other parties, and you know, and there could be other institutions. We have we have companies that come out of university that have, where the inventors basically were, partnered among several universities, right? So we would share that. And then their exit normally, right, is when usually the company either becomes one of two things. Everyone starts the company because they love it and they want it to be a lifestyle, and then somewhere along the line, they end up having to sell it, just because things happen. The other one is that people are building the company thinking it's going to grow quickly, and then if they take VC money, which is venture capital money, they pretty much want the business sold, within 7 to 10 years, maybe a little longer if it's biotech. So they, but then if it's not going as well as the VCs like, maybe it doesn't exit, and maybe it becomes a lifestyle business. So a lifestyle business is you just like what you're doing and you just keep running it for a long time. But the exit where everyone gets their money back is when the company is sold or acquired by somebody else. So, and we've had one company that got acquired by Dell, and they got acquired by Sophos. I mean, some of these companies get acquired by large companies. So I like to always talk about the valley of death, because it really is a valley of death. Most companies fail at some point, especially if they don't have a lot of resources. And researchers basically most researchers aren't trained on the business side of it. Some do. I mean, you can go get an MBA or something too on the side, or you can just learn, just sort of learn on your own. And there's a certain amount of money that's available, right? So you can get, federal research dollars, everything's used to that. You can get some other, sometimes industry support dollars while you're working on it. But I have this line of gaps, and not every company has exactly the same gap, but a lot of companies fall into one of these gaps where they can't get enough funding to actually prove that it works, so that they can acquire other funding. They don't have enough money for IP protection. So if the university gets behind it, we'll basically prosecute the patents, at least in the United States. But patent prosecution is really expensive. Sometimes I've had people come to me and they're starting a business and they really want to get a patent. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, I agree a patent would be good for your business, but you're going to spend all your money getting a patent when you really should be spending your money starting a business. Other intellectual property will come down the road. Getting introductions, scaling up manufacturing. So, what you really need are resources now. They're going to help you risk all of that. It will help you get through that. So, there's help out there. There's help from the government. There's help from, sometimes other companies, and there's often help from the academic institution. So there's always this relationship outside of somebody just deciding they want to start a business on their own. That happens. Especially if you have enough money. So George Mason University has a whole series of, or connected to a whole series of resources that are available to when someone wants to start a company. So we have a thing called Mason Enterprise. Our office tech transfer is right under here, but all of these other areas are underneath the under Mason Enterprise, which ultimately reports to the Vice President of Research here at George Mason University. So I already talked a little bit about what we do. We have a mix downstairs. If you go down one floor and you see this nice glassed in area, there's some incubator space down there, and there's a fair amount of, there's some CNC equipment, and there's some people that'll come down and can give you some advice and, help you out somewhat. We have Mason Enterprise Centers, which are part of the Small Business Development Corporation. So we have them all over the state, but we have several that are run basically out of George Mason University. And the Mason Enterprise Centers, they provide some offices for you to work in. They bring in accountants, they bring in attorneys. I mean, they have resources that people can use. And then we have federal and state programs that are administered. ICAP, and I forget what it's called, right? What it stands for right now, but it's a program where the state of Virginia will take people through a series of courses. Some of them are relatively short. The state will help find mentors, and they'll basically help guide someone through. ICAP sometimes will work in combination with other state grants where people actually will get some money. Actually, to get in ICAP, they give you a small amount of money to do what's called customer discovery. They try to teach you how to go and find out who your customers might be and actually ask them if they're even if they're interested or if they think what you're doing is a good idea. I-Corps is from National Science Foundation, has a I-Corps program where they do the same thing, only it's much bigger. And we have cohorts going through both ICAP and I-Corps for the last several years. Far back as I can. So we have the SPDC, that was here. PPAC has to do with procurement. The WBC is the Women's Business Center, and then there's a finance center. So all of these resources are basically part of the George Mason ecosystem to help promote economic development. And it works. These are the numbers from just last year. I just updated this slide yesterday of basically the impact that it's had on the state of Virginia. $3.36 billion is not a minor value. And if you look at the programs that are there, right, 60% women, 46% minority, 50% veterans. So that's a focus, towards Mason too, to try to make sure that we are actually serving underserved communities. So I'm not watching the time, so you need to tell me to speed or something. So in Virginia, we have Virginia Innovation Partnership Authority. This is an organization. 2 minutes. Okay, we're going to speak really right along. Which basically distributes money from the state through a whole series of programs. And this Catalyst program has been for cybersecurity. And several faculty at the university have been getting funding for that. We have other funding, CCI, which is a Commonwealth Cyber Initiative. Also, we're getting cyber. So there's several grants for people who have ideas. They don't even have to have a business yet necessarily. Have ideas to help just push it across to fill some of those gaps. I just highlighted one that's a fund, but if you have an idea, we can help sort of direct you in the right area. Actually, may actually just direct you down one flight of stairs over to the mix, because we have 2 people down there who are who help act as our intermediary between some of the programs. Okay, talk about we have national programs and other sources that we can go to get money. And you can always go to private sources to find money. And then this is just to show that Northern Virginia is very, very vibrant. The Northern Virginia Technical Council comes up with a map every year showing where all the businesses are. And last year's map didn't have this down here. All these were up in here. And it was a very, very crowded map. So this year, it appears like they basically decided to throw the company names down here because they couldn't get them all on the map. But you'll see everything from the like Prince William County, Fairfax is in here. So you'll find the government, you'll find universities, including George Mason. The VIPC is the program that administers all the different programs from the state, among all of these companies. So this is probably one of the most vibrant communities for starting up a new business and succeeding in the country. I would say second to the Bay Area, but I'm not sure, or Silicon Valley, but I'm not sure how that's going to go in the next year.